Los Angeles was alive in its usual chaotic symphony. The relentless sun hammered down on glass towers and shimmering car roofs. The pavement radiated heat waves, blurring the horizon like a desert mirage. Horns honked in frustration. Tires screeched on hot asphalt. A cacophony of life, rushing, colliding, and never stopping. Amid the storm of noise and movement, no one noticed the little girl standing alone at a busy crosswalk. She wore dusty sneakers, scuffed from city streets, and a faded hoodie that hung loosely on her small frame. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, strands clinging to her sweat-dampened forehead. Her eyes scanned the world with quiet intensity, absorbing everything but without a single sound leaving her lips. Her name was Aliyah. She was 9 years old, and she was born deaf. Aliyah stood perfectly still, watching the intersection ahead. A black Bentley, glossy like the pages of a luxury magazine, stalled again and again. The driver, a woman in a sharp business suit, tapped the steering wheel in growing frustration. Behind her dark sunglasses, her brow furrowed with impatience and anger. The engine sputtered, then died. Again, the crowd surged and ebbed around them, but Aliyah noticed everything: the subtle tremor of the engine, the flickering lights on the dashboard, the woman's tense jaw. She took a step closer, then another, until she was standing right next to the car. Without a word, she tapped on the driver's window. The woman glanced over briefly, an annoyed scowl twisting her lips, probably thinking this little girl was just another panhandler asking for change. She didn't respond. But Aliyah didn't move away. Instead, she pressed her palm flat on the glass, then raised her hand, fingers moving in a deliberate, practiced sign. "I can help." The woman blinked, confused. For a moment, the noise of the city seemed to hush. The heat rippling above the asphalt slowed. The woman cracked open the window, her voice sharp. "What? Are you playing some kind of game?" But Aliyah was already crouched by the front of the car, her small fingers deftly inspecting the dashboard and ignition panel. Her gaze was steady, her movements precise. She touched the ignition switch lightly, then traced a path along the wiring hidden beneath the steering column. She signed again, slower this time. "Ignition loose. Contact faulty." Minutes passed like hours. People slowed down to glance at the scene, some curious, others impatient. But Aliyah ignored them all. Then, suddenly, the engine roared back to life, steady and strong as if nothing had ever been wrong. The woman's lips parted in surprise. She climbed out of the car, still shielding her eyes from the sun. Her frustration gave way to awe. Who taught you this?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Aliyah smiled shyly, but didn't answer. After all, she hadn't heard the question. The woman knelt down to meet her eyes. There was something in Aliyah's calm confidence that unsettled her, something quietly extraordinary. This little girl, silent in a city that never stopped talking, had just fixed her expensive car with nothing but her hands and knowledge. "You're amazing," she said finally. Aliyah just nodded. That night, the streets of Los Angeles buzzed with the usual noise: the distant wail of sirens, the murmur of strangers, the laughter and shouting spilling out from late-night diners. But somewhere, in a small, forgotten corner of the city, a girl named Aliyah lay on a thin mattress in a shelter, her world silent yet filled with the noise of her thoughts. She was alone in many ways. The shelter didn't have the resources for children like her. No speech therapists, no sign language classes, no special programs. The world around her didn't know how to listen. but Aaliyah did. She learned everything with her eyes and her hands. The shapes of the world, the rhythm of a heartbeat, the flash of a smile, the signs that others missed. While other kids her age filled notebooks with stories and equations, Aaliyah filled her mind with ways to communicate, to connect, to survive. Meanwhile, far above the streets, in a sleek skyscraper on the 40th floor overlooking the city, Lena Green stared at the screen of her laptop. She was a billionaire, the visionary CEO of one of America's most successful biotech companies, the kind of woman who had built an empire from the ground up, who knew how to see opportunity where others saw none. On the screen, a grainy security camera video played. There, in the footage, was the same little girl, Aaliyah, fixing the stalled Bentley with quiet skill. Lena leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Find her," she said softly to her assistant. "I want to meet her. Now." Hours later, the Bentley's driver returned, not alone this time. The sleek black car pulled up outside the shelter's worn building. The air smelled of damp concrete and old linoleum, far from the clean, polished offices high above. Lena stepped out, her presence commanding despite the modest surroundings. Her eyes scanned the room filled with tired faces and broken dreams. And then she saw her, Aaliyah, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by worn books and a half-disassembled tablet. Lena crouched down beside her, holding out her hands in a slow, deliberate gesture. "Do you want to hear?" Aaliyah's eyes widened, then shone with hope. She nodded eagerly. Lena smiled, warmth breaking through her usual steel exterior. "Then come with me. We're going to Switzerland." 1 month later, in a grand hall in Bern, Switzerland, dignitaries and scientists gathered for the launch of Lena Green's latest foundation project, one that promised to change the lives of millions with hearing impairments. As Lena stepped up to the podium, she paused. "Genius," she said, "often lives where you least expect it. Tonight, I introduce someone who changed my world." From behind the curtain, Aaliyah appeared, wearing a pristine white dress paired with sneakers, her signature style. A small hearing processor nestled behind her ear, a bridge to the sounds she'd only recently begun to discover. The crowd fell silent. Aaliyah approached the microphone, her small hands trembling slightly as she raised it to her lips. Her voice was soft, trembling, but filled with an unyielding strength. "Do you understand me?" Tears welled in Lena's eyes. The applause was deafening. For the first time, Aaliyah heard it, the sound of a world she had long observed in silence. The morning sun streamed weakly through the dusty windows of the city shelter. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old books and faint traces of cleaning supplies. Aaliyah sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by scattered pieces of a broken tablet and a faded instruction manual written in a rough, broken English. She wasn't in school. The shelter didn't have the resources to teach her, and the world outside rarely made space for someone like her, a girl who was deaf from birth, left behind in silence. The adults in the shelter saw her as quiet, maybe even unreachable. They didn't know she was watching everything, learning everything, just without sound. Aaliyah's fingers traced the edges of the tablet, her eyes flicking between the images and the words she couldn't hear, but could understand through her fingertips and her mind. Every day was a lesson of survival. She knew how to read lips, catch subtle movements, and feel the vibrations of the world around her. But no one had told her she could dream bigger. Far away, high above the city skyline in a glass tower filled with screens and possibilities, Lena Green stared at the images on her laptop with a mixture of admiration and urgency. That little girl, Aaliyah, was more than just a fleeting moment caught on security footage. She was a spark. Lena's company was on the cutting edge of biotechnology. They specialized in neural implants, devices designed to restore hearing and reconnect the silent world to those who had lost it. But so far, the technology had been reserved for adults, people already deafened by injury or illness. Aaliyah's case was different. She had never heard a single note of music, the laughter of friends, or the hum of the city. She had grown up in a world of silence, a world that most people didn't even realize existed. But Lena believed that with the right help, with the right technology, Aaliyah could have a chance at something no one had dared to offer her before, a life filled with sound. That evening, the sleek black Bentley pulled up outside the shelter once again. Lena stepped inside the worn building with purpose, carrying herself like a force of nature. The shelter's tired walls seemed to shrink in the presence of someone so powerful, so determined. She found Aaliyah sitting quietly in a corner, her fingers fluttering over the pages of a dog-eared book. Lena knelt down, lowering herself to the girl's level. With slow, clear gestures, she signed, "Do you want to hear?" Aaliyah's eyes widened, shimmering with a mix of hope and disbelief. She nodded, slowly, carefully, as if the possibility was too good to be true. Lena smiled softly, her eyes misting over. "Then come with me," she signed. "We will change your world." The next days passed in a blur of excitement and preparation. Aaliyah had never left her neighborhood before, never traveled on airplanes or seen snow, much less Switzerland, the land of mountains, precision, and miracles. At the airport, the sterile white walls and endless corridors buzzed with voices she couldn't hear, but she felt the anticipation, the energy. Lena held her hand tightly, guiding her through customs, security, and into the outside world of possibility. Switzerland was colder than Aaliyah expected. The air was crisp and sharp, unlike the warm, dusty streets she knew. But here, at a world-renowned medical center, the brightest minds had gathered to work on new frontiers, technology that could give sound to the silent. Aaliyah met with doctors, engineers, and speech therapists. They showed her small devices, sleek and nearly invisible. They explained with signs and pictures, their patience endless. Every moment was a discovery, every new sound a gift. The beep of a machine, the soft rustle of fabric, the distant rumble of a truck, all new to her ears, all a wonder. One night, lying awake in the quiet hospital room, Aaliyah thought about the world she had known, the silence, the isolation, and the world she was stepping into, the sounds, the voices, the life. For the first time, she felt a spark inside her, a dream that stretched beyond silence. Meanwhile, Lena watched Aaliyah with fierce pride. This little girl, once invisible in a city that barely noticed her, was about to become a symbol of hope. A reminder that genius, resilience, and courage often live where no one expects. The journey ahead was long. There would be challenges, frustrations, moments of doubt, but Aaliyah was ready. More than ready. She could not hear, but she understood everything. And now, the world was beginning to listen. The Grand Hall of the U.S. Embassy in Bern was filled with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light over the polished marble floors, and the murmur of voices echoed softly beneath the ornate ceiling. Guests dressed in elegant gowns and tailored suits mingled with journalists, philanthropists, and top scientists from around the world. Cameras flashed, and glasses clinked, marking the evening as one of celebration and hope. Lena Green stood backstage, her heart pounding beneath the tailored fabric of her dress. Years of tireless work had led to this moment, the launch of her foundation's newest breakthrough in neural implant technology, designed specifically to restore hearing in children born deaf. But tonight wasn't about technology. Tonight was about a girl. She glanced once more toward the curtains and smiled softly. There, behind the velvet drapes, stood Aaliyah. The little girl who had fixed a broken Bentley on a sun-baked street corner without saying a single word. The child who had lived in silence all her life, yet understood more than most ever would. The child who was about to speak to the world for the very first time. The room hushed as Lena stepped forward to the podium. Her voice, steady but filled with emotion, carried clearly across the hall. Sometimes, genius lives where no one thinks to look. Sometimes, hope is found in the quietest places. She paused, looking down briefly before continuing. Tonight, I am honored to introduce someone whose courage and determination inspired this project. A girl whose brilliance and resilience have changed my life. The curtains parted, and Aaliyah stepped into the light. She wore a simple white dress and white sneakers. The small hearing processor behind her ear barely noticeable under her dark hair. Her eyes scanned the crowd with a mixture of awe and quiet strength. The room fell utterly silent. No one had expected the moment to be so still, so reverent. Aaliyah approached the microphone, her small hands trembling slightly. She took a breath that seemed to hold a lifetime of silence, and then, in a voice soft and uncertain but clear, she spoke. "Do you understand me?" The crowd was stunned. For many, it was a question that pierced the heart. For others, a miracle unfolding live before their eyes. Lena covered her mouth with one hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. Aaliyah's voice wavered, but she steadied herself, drawing strength from the thousands of eyes fixed on her. "Yes," she said, her lips curling into a tentative smile. "I hear you." The applause began slowly, then grew until the entire hall rose to its feet, clapping and cheering for nearly 2 minutes. For Aaliyah, those sounds were new and overwhelming. She had spent her whole life observing the world silently, longing for connection, for belonging. Now she was embraced by a world that finally heard her, not just with ears, but with their hearts. Later, after the formal speeches, the buzz of conversation and flashing cameras filled the room. Aaliyah sat quietly beside Lena, her fingers tracing the familiar shapes of sign language as she chatted with guests who eagerly signed back. Lena watched her, pride swelling in her chest. This was the moment when barriers broke down, when prejudice and assumptions gave way to understanding and respect. When a little girl's silence turned into the loudest voice in the room. The journey to this night had been far from easy. After arriving in Switzerland, Aaliyah's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The implant surgery had been delicate, the therapy long and demanding. Each day was filled with new sounds, soft whispers, the tick of clocks, the rustle of leaves in the wind. Some days were frustrating when the noise was too much, too fast, and the silence inside her seemed to pull her back. But with every struggle came breakthroughs. Sounds turned into words, words into sentences, sentences into stories. Lena had invested millions into research, but it was Aaliyah's spirit that had fueled the real progress. She had taught the scientists that technology alone was not enough. There needed to be patience, love, and a belief in the impossible. The night of the gala was also a celebration of the foundation Lena had launched, dedicated to giving children like Aaliyah a chance at sound, a chance at life beyond silence. Philanthropists pledged millions. Scientists spoke of new frontiers. Journalists hailed the project as revolutionary. And in the middle of it all stood Aaliyah, the living proof that hope could break through any barrier. As the evening wound down, a young reporter approached Lena and Aaliyah. "Aaliyah," she said gently, "what does it feel like to hear for the first time?" Aaliyah paused, then signed slowly, her voice catching on the last word. "Like waking up. Like finding colors where there was only black." Lena smiled, knowing that for Aaliyah, hearing was more than sound. It was life itself unfolding anew. That night, after the last guest had left and the lights dimmed, Lena and Aaliyah stood by the window overlooking the twinkling city below. Lena turned to her, eyes soft. "You changed everything, Aaliyah, not just for you, but for every child who will come after." Aaliyah nodded, her smile radiant. "I want to help others, to make sure no one feels invisible like I did." And in that moment, the world felt a little quieter, a little kinder. A world where silence was no longer a barrier, but a bridge.